Chapter 6 by Bus Through the Outback, Video 1 of 3. In the early morning, a small bus with a huge trailer arrived at the Bracken Inn to pick us up. Our belongings were thrown into the trailer and we were thrown on the bus. The bus was filled with people of different ages and heritage. There were two beautiful Danish girls, young and flawless, perhaps 18 years old. And to make it really unfair, they were nice as well. It would have been easier to bear if they had been impossibly rude. In my school days, the beautiful girls were always rude and nasty. There was the funniest Swiss girl from the French-speaking part of Switzerland. She was tall and dark, had the widest and whitest smile, real model material. She was a riot. There was the Welsh guy. No idea who he was. I didn't understand him at all. He might as well have spoken Chinese. There was the older Swedish couple. They were slightly odd, saucy, and did not really fit into the rest of the jumbled group of ragged people. There was the Canadian girl who only had 2 weeks annual leave and was trying to see the entire continent during that time. She didn't stop saying ridiculous. There was the bus driver, leathery skinned. I never saw his eyes because he constantly wore his dark sunglasses. I bet they cost him more than $3. His name was Ted. He was loud and easygoing, as if he had no cares in the world, a stereotypical Australian character. I swear there were 2 English guys too, but they were so forgettable, unspectacular, that I cannot conjure them into being anymore, and might have imagined them. In fact, my diary tells me there were 19 people on that bus, and I do not remember the rest of them. All of these people were friends for the few days we were stuck on the bus together, but none of them enough of a friend that I remember their names. Apart from the Swiss girl, well, I do not remember her real name, but we lovingly called her Desert Turtle. We made our way to Wilpena Pound in the Flinders Ranges, one of the few mountain ranges in Australia. That would be our camp for the night. The further away from Adelaide we got, the less traffic there was. Driving through more French-looking purple lavender fields, we arrived at a vineyard for lunch. There, the vineyard-owned dog threw up all over the beautifully tiled floor as a welcome. I was sure he must have been drunk from fermenting grapes he found somewhere. After lunch, so were half of the bus passengers. Drunk, that is. Ted got his first speeding ticket at 11:26 a.m. and his second at 3:44 p.m. The police came after him and he had to pay the tickets then and there. In Germany, there would have been a lot more paperwork and a long delay involved. No one pays fines from the car window. Bad for Ted, good for the officers. I wonder if they declare each fine back at the station at the end of the day. We drove through bitty little towns that had only 3 houses, but to my astonishment, all of these teensy-weensy settlements had a pub, a gas station and, wait for it, a hotel. What did they need a hotel for? And what did the pub landlord live off? Stopping in one of the pubs, we found it was a local shop, so we bought ourselves new hats. The best feature of the hats was the integrated fly nets that you could fold down in front of your face. Granted, they looked even worse than the ones we already had, but as Germans we are highly attracted to practical things, or what we believe would be practical. We drove past Mount Bluff, which got its name because a government geologist made his bosses believe it underwent significant geological changes that would have to be closely monitored. For years, the geologist was paid for his research until government officials realized there were absolutely no changes and he was an imposter. Maybe Mum and I should have tried becoming fake geologists to earn a few dollars. Finally, we pitched our tents at the Wilpena Pound campground. Somehow Ted produced fish and chips out of thin air, and we had what seemed to me a royally good meal in the greatest dining room of all. Above us only sky, and around us nothing at all. In our tent I listened to the crickets for half the night. The wind played a melody and the trees sang along to it. It was too beautiful to miss a beat. I regretted listening to the nighttime concerto at 7 a.m. the next morning when I had to get up regardless of my sleepless night. There was nothing but beauty around us, and I only had this one day before the bus would drive off without me. We were surrounded by Red River gum trees, the ones with the nice bark. The soil was already turning into a red color, and I wondered if it would get even redder towards the center of Australia. It smelled of forest. It was already hot, but the rich scent made me giddy, and I agreed to climb to the highest point of the Flinders Ranges, Vulpina Pound. The Flinders Ranges are a circular mountain range, a marvelously grand meteor. Oh my God. I start the sentence again. The Flinders Ranges are a circular mountain range, a marvelously grand meteor crater to be exact. The crown of this crater is made of furiously serrated mountains which become a mellow floating skirt of green bushes and trees the further down you are. Then, on the flat ground around the gigantic crater, it was so desolate again. I thought the Flinders Ranges were comparable to an oasis, spectacular. To get there was less spectacular. From the camp it was only 1.5 miles to the top, but the incline was very steep. It required a hike on a non-paved trail through rubble and rocks. It proved to be challenging, at least to me. You must know, I'm the most athletic person in the world. Not. Untrained, I started walking briskly with determination, as fast as my 2 small shoes would allow. But walking fast and briskly in 90 Fahrenheit is a really bad idea. At least that's what my body decided when it betrayed me and just stopped working. I collapsed on a rock. There I lay with my fly-net hat, looking touristy and, now that I knew what the word meant, ridiculous. My mother, who is so much fitter than me, gave me water from her leather water pouches, shaped like kidneys, and strapped around our necks on thin, skin-cutting leather straps. We also bought these from our by now proven useless outdoor shop in Germany. After a little while I sat up and gained motivation to go on by the fact that most of our bus friends had walked past us by now. None of them seemed to even break a sweat. I felt foolish but determined. Vulpina Pound had to be scaled, and scale it I did. Once on top, I saw a sunken natural amphitheater in the middle of the mountain range. The view was breathtaking. It was unpolluted by humans, with no structure in sight. The only evidence of mankind was some boot prints leading down into the amphitheater. It was not only devoid of human activity, but also of animals. There was nothing living anywhere. Either it was too hot for any creature, or we were so stinking sweaty that they ran off. Either way, there was complete silence. Not a depressive, strained silence, but the majestic, dignified silence of strength. It was irresistible, like the alluring call of a siren. Packing up after lunch, Ted drove us right through the Flinders Ranges. Lying before us was 520 to 600 million years of history, told in stacked layers of earth that looked like the pages of a big book. For geologists, this piece of earth must be heaven. Wallabies and kangaroos honored us with their presence, hopping alongside the bus. We even saw our first emu and little exotic birds that you'd only find at a zoo in Germany. It was a wondrous collection of colorful feathers and sing-song. And then there was silence. It was inspired by a majestic eagle with an enormous wingspan of 6.5 feet. I was impressed, Soundlessly he glided around us in wide circles, never taking his eyes off the invaders of his territory. Sublimely he watched over his land, the Sky King of the crater, no doubt respected by all inhabitants. And just like a warning, the eagle let out an ear-splitting shrill into the silence. Then he left us, and we left too. The eagle's sound is so ingrained into my memory that I'm pretty sure it will be one of those things that gets repeated in my brain when I'm dying. To me, it was a mystical moment. I'm sure it wasn't to everyone. I'm sure to most it was a mere coincidence that we left the Flinders Ranges a second after the eagle's warning. But coincidence robs the world of so much mystique and wonder. I choose to make my world more exciting. I choose to believe that the Sky King made me leave the Flinders Ranges that day. We stopped for the night at a cheap backpacker by the roadside. As a group, we lit a fire and ate kangaroo steak. I can't say I'm a fan, but then I'm not a big meat eater. Nowadays, living in America, where meat seems to be the main ingredient of everything, and you have to search for your vegetables with a magnifying glass, I order more vegetarian meals than not. Ted was more than a driver. He was also our personal chef for the duration of the journey. So we woke up to his freshly made pancakes from the barbecue. In fact, everything was cooked on the barbecue, which looks very different to the ones I knew in Germany. The Australian barbecues are made from a sheet of metal. There is no grate, so you can cook anything on the flat metal. Fabulous. One would not need any other cooking device. Of course, the pancakes tasted wonderful. We felt like we were on a 5-star cruise ship. Mum and I hadn't eaten so well in a long time. Finally, we entered the desert. Real deal desert. I had been dreaming about this desert with all its stories, and finally I was going to be in it. We saw so much in our first day that I struggled to remember it all. I felt like a newborn who is staring open-mouthed at the world around her because of all the new and alien and beautiful and exciting beyond understanding things. One thing I remember clearly is the Lake Creek coal mines. Marked by their enormous machines, the mines are completely devastated, devoid of any human beings, like a post-apocalypse setting. Close to those mines, in the middle of nowhere, lived a quirky old man named Abe, whom we visited. He looked like a desert version of Radagast the Brown from The Lord of the Rings. He lived surrounded by a radius of 650 miles of vast nothingness. Only him and his dog. People become very kooky when left like that. In Abe's case, the isolation had resulted in an awe-inspiring genius. Out of boredom, I assume, he reinvented the Roman alphabet and gave it a new meaning according to the shape of the letters. I mean, what else is there to do in the middle of the desert on your own? You'll either turn into a Jack Torrance, but with no one to murder, or you'll turn your energy to arty extravaganzas like alphabets and such. My name, according to Abe's alphabet, would be Traveler Toward the Sunrise. I like that. I felt very close to that name, even though it was given to me by a crazy man in the desert. Or exactly because of that. Abe's whole plot of land was filled with art. Orderly Middle Europeans might have said it was filled with junk, but in the middle of the red desert, even the skeleton of what once was a car looks picturesque. Because there was no power out there, Abe made his own. He powered lamps and his washing machine with a bike. It worked. Of course, in this heat you'll think twice about starting a load of washing. The encounter with Abe was both inspiring and sobering. In my misspent youth, I dreamed about being a hermit living in a cave somewhere in Sweden, just like Ronja Räubertochter, a character based on the writings of Astrid Lindgren. But Abe's efforts to survive in this harsh, off-the-grid place showed me that I really wanted a cave with room service. At the ochre pits, you'll find stones that work like chalk if you wet them. Aborigines used them for their elaborate body paintings. Shortly after Ted showed us this trick, half of the bus had painted faces. Near the next roadhouse, he told us to wipe our faces because Aborigines also visited the place and could be offended. My heart sank. Unknowingly, I had committed a sacrilege to Aboriginal culture, a culture I was interested in and wanted to know more of, possibly firsthand. I felt absolutely terrible. I now deeply mistrusted Ted, for he had led us to the ochre pits, which are sacred ground. From now on, I read all the books about Aboriginal culture that I was carrying in my far too heavy backpack. Something like that should never happen again. I would be better informed in future. I did not want to be one of those tourists who show no respect for cultures. I wanted to be cultured, but tourists never are. And by stepping on a plane and flying out of your home country, you make yourself a tourist. Tourists destroy countries, cultures, worlds. Traveling educates, one could argue, but does it really? Surely not if you travel like this, I thought. This was tour-like traveling, where the world is served up in bite-sized chunks, appetizingly spiced to please. I swore that this would be the last organized travel of my life. The landscape around us was as bare as my soul felt just then. But somehow the desert was beautiful too, with its very own deadly charm. We crossed ghost towns that could not survive out there. They looked like sets from old Western movies. There were wagon wheels, half-fallen down houses, and antique glass bottles. Sometimes all that was left of a house was the brick chimney, and everywhere sat little lizards to bask in the sunlight. The Otnadatta track meandered through a bare, wondrous landscape, which on closer inspection contained lots of life in its simplest forms. There were the tiniest little plants, spiders, snakes, and insects who had made this hostile place their home. This was the old track of the Ghan, the train track that runs straight through the desert from Adelaide via Alice Springs all the way up to Darwin in the north. And there was an even older camel track, a track probably as old as the first explorers, and now we used it to make our way through the wilderness.